Joseph James DeAngelo, better known as the Golden State Killer, is a man whose reign of terror gripped California from the mid-1970s to the mid-1980s. He committed a series of heinous crimes spanning burglaries, rapes, and murders that left communities in fear for more than a decade. His crimes remained unsolved for over 40 years, until groundbreaking DNA technology finally identified him in 2018. DeAngelo's story is one of terror, deception, and eventual justice. Here is a detailed 20-minute account of Joseph James DeAngelo's chilling tale. Joseph James DeAngelo was born on November 8, 1945, in Bath, New York. His early life was marked by trauma and instability. According to reports, he witnessed abuse in his home, and these experiences may have contributed to his later violent behavior. DeAngelo served in the U.S. Navy during the Vietnam War and later attended Sacramento State University, where he earned a degree in criminal justice. He seemed destined for a stable life, even securing a job as a police officer in California. However, beneath the facade of a law-abiding citizen of another man harboring dark fantasies, DeAngelo's employment in law enforcement, first in Exeter, California, and later in Auburn, provided him with knowledge of police procedures and investigative techniques. Ironically, the man who would later terrorize California was once responsible for upholding the law. In 1979, DeAngelo was fired from the Auburn Police Department for shoplifting a hammer and dog repellent, an incident that foreshadowed his double life. DeAngelo's criminal career began as the Visalia ransacker. Between 1973 and 1975, the small town of Visalia in central California was plagued by a series of over 100 burglaries. The ransacker's modus operandi was unusual. He would break into homes, ransack rooms, and steal personal items of little value, while leaving larger items behind. The burglar often rearranged or vandalized items, displaying a bizarre obsession with the psychological impact of his crimes. The escalation of his crimes became evident in 1975 when he attempted to kidnap 16-year-old Beth Snelling. Her father, Claude Snelling, intervened, only to be shot dead by DeAngelo. This marked the first time the ransacker's activities turned deadly. Following this incident, the burglaries in Visalia abruptly stopped. But this was only the beginning of DeAngelo's violent spree. After leaving Visalia, DeAngelo resurfaced in Sacramento, where he escalated his crimes as the East Area Rapist. Between 1976 and 1979, he terrorized the Sacramento region and neighboring areas by committing a series of over 50 rapes. His attacks were meticulously planned. He would stalk his victims for days or weeks, learning their routines and even breaking into their homes beforehand to unlock windows, remove ammunition from guns, or leave hidden ligatures for future use. The East Area Rapist was known for his chilling methods. He often attacked couples, binding the man and forcing him to lie face down while stacking dishes on his back. He would then rape the woman, warning that, if he heard the dishes clatter, he would kill them both. He taunted his victims, often staying in their homes 4 hours after the assault. His voice, heard by many during the attacks, became infamous, a low, menacing tone that he sometimes used to mock his victims. Despite extensive investigations, the police were unable to catch him. His knowledge of law enforcement tactics and forensic evidence helped him evade capture, and the fear he instilled in the community was palpable. Residents installed extra locks, adopted large dogs, and organized neighborhood watch programs, but the rapist remained elusive. As the East Area Rapist's attacks subsided in Northern California, a new predator emerged in Southern California, the original Night Stalker. It would later be discovered that this was the same man. Between 1979 and 1986, DeAngelo committed 13 murders and several more rapes, this time targeting couples in their homes. His attacks in Southern California were more violent and sinister, showing a disturbing escalation in his behavior. DeAngelo's tactics were similar to his earlier rapes, but with one critical difference: he now murdered his victims. He bludgeoned and shot them, leaving behind scenes of unspeakable horror. The case of the original Night Stalker baffled detectives, who had little idea they were dealing with the same person responsible for the East Area Rapist crimes. The various law enforcement agencies did not connect the cases until much later, and this allowed DeAngelo to continue his crimes undetected. In 1981, he committed one of his most infamous crimes: the double murder of Sherry Domingo and Greg Sanchez in Goleta, California. The couple was brutally attacked in their home. Domingo was raped before being murdered, while Sanchez was bludgeoned to death. The brutality of the crimes was shocking, even to seasoned investigators. After 1986, the killings suddenly stopped. The Golden State Killer seemingly vanished, leaving authorities puzzled. The cases grew cold, and despite numerous investigations, tips, and suspect lists, DeAngelo's identity remained a mystery. The crimes haunted law enforcement, victims, and their families for decades. Forensic breakthroughs eventually linked the crimes of the Visalia ransacker, East Area Rapist, and original Night Stalker to the same person through DNA evidence. In the early 2000s, investigators confirmed that the same DNA was present at multiple crime scenes across California, but they still couldn't match it to a suspect. The key breakthrough came in 2018, when investigators used genetic genealogy, a relatively new technique at the time. They uploaded the Golden State Killer's DNA profile to a public genealogy database and found distant relatives of the suspect. After narrowing down the family tree, they identified Joseph James DeAngelo as the prime suspect. Investigators then covertly collected DeAngelo's DNA from items he discarded, which provided a match. On April 24, 2018, police arrested DeAngelo at his home in Citrus Heights, California, a suburb of Sacramento. By then, he was a 72-year-old man, living a seemingly ordinary life. He had been married, had children, and even grandchildren. The facade of a normal life was shattered as the world learned that this elderly man was one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. Following his arrest, DeAngelo initially remained silent. However, during an interrogation, he muttered about an inner personality, Jerry, who compelled him to commit the crimes. It was clear that DeAngelo had been aware of his actions, but he used the notion of an alternate persona as a twisted form of self-justification. In June 2020, DeAngelo pleaded guilty to 13 murders and numerous rapes and burglaries in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. The guilty plea allowed him to avoid a lengthy trial, but it also forced him to confront the families of his victims, many of whom attended the hearings and gave impact statements. The trial brought out heart-wrenching stories of lives destroyed by his actions. Some of the surviving victims and family members spoke directly to DeAngelo, expressing their anger, pain, and sorrow. On August 21, 2020, Joseph James DeAngelo was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. He showed little emotion as the judge handed down the sentence, bringing some closure to the victims and their families. DeAngelo was sent to a state prison, where he remains incarcerated, likely for the rest of his life.